All right. Welcome to another narration of mine. Settle in for a moment. This is where the voices I carry meet the version of the truth most people avoid, and where the things we uncover tend to stay with us long after the story ends. Only the brave souls and the fearless ones stay until the end. I never thought my life would end up like this. Typing into some anonymous forum at 3 in the morning because it's the only place I feel remotely safe. I know this sounds dramatic, but I swear every word I'm about to write is true. And if it helps even one person recognize the signs earlier than I did, maybe it's worth digging all this up again. I guess the best place to start is the night I first realized something was wrong. I was 19, living at home with my mom because I was trying to save money. She worked long hours, and I worked nights at a gas station, the kind of job where the customers blend into a blur of tired faces and late-night cravings. It was around 1:30 a.m., slow shift, nothing unusual, until he walked in. The guy wasn't remarkable. Average height, average clothes, average everything. But the way he looked at me, it wasn't interest or anger or even curiosity. It was like he already knew me, like he had been waiting. He didn't buy anything. He didn't say anything. He just stood there for a full minute, staring, until I finally muttered something about the store closing soon, even though we were 24 hours. He gave this small smile, almost polite, and walked out. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next morning, when I got home, my mom looked exhausted. Not the normal kind. There was something twitchy in her eyes. The first thing she asked was whether I had changed the passwords on our Wi-Fi or bank accounts. I told her no. She said she'd been getting login alerts all night, but nothing seemed stolen. I didn't think much of it. Tech glitch. Happens all the time. Except that afternoon, when I was trying to sleep, I kept hearing tapping sounds on my bedroom window. Soft, careful taps, like someone testing how thick the glass was. Our house is a one-story, so anyone could walk right up. I told myself it was just branches. But then I noticed something. There were no trees near my window. I remember pulling the curtain back just an inch and seeing nothing. No person, no animal, just the soft imprint of what looked like a fingerprint smear on the outside of the glass. I still tell myself it could have been dirt, but deep down, I already knew. Things escalated fast after that. 2 nights later, while I was walking to my car in the gas station lot, I found a sheet of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. It wasn't a threat, nothing like that. It just had my name written across it. Not printed, handwritten. The kind of handwriting that looks too neat, too slow, too careful. My manager laughed it off. My coworkers teased me. But I had this sinking feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away. The next time I saw him, it was on my break. I was sitting outside behind the store, scrolling through my phone. When I looked up, He was leaning against the wall near the dumpsters, just watching me. He wasn't smiling this time. He didn't even blink. He stared like a person trying to memorize a face. I told him to leave. He didn't. He only stepped forward once, slow, deliberate, like a parent testing how close they could get before their child flinches. I backed inside, locked the door, and called my manager. By the time anyone came out back, he was gone, and everyone acted like I was overreacting. No cameras behind the station, no proof. But he knew where I worked. He knew my name. And somehow, over the next few weeks, he learned much more. Mail started showing up, addressed to me from companies I'd never heard of. Surveys, catalog subscriptions, medical pamphlets about conditions I definitely didn't have. Nothing harmful, but unsettling. Someone had to use my name, my address. One evening, my mom knocked on my bedroom door, holding her phone with a look that scared me. She asked if I'd been signing up for anything weird. I said no. She told me she'd been getting calls, asking if she could confirm the emergency contact information for her son. She didn't know who the callers were. They always hung up when she asked too many questions. That same week, she started getting texts. Ones she wouldn't show me. Ones that kept her awake until dawn. I could hear her pacing the hallway at night, whispering to herself, trying not to cry. I asked what was wrong, but she wouldn't say. She just kept saying everything was fine while pressing her hands to her temples, like something inside her head hurt. I didn't know it then, but she was already unraveling. The worst moment came on a Friday night. I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, when my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Your mom looks tired tonight." I froze. My toothbrush fell into the sink. I called out for her, but she didn't answer. I ran through the house until I found her in the living room, staring at the front door. Not sitting, standing perfectly still, like she'd been caught mid-motion. When I asked what was wrong, she told me she thought someone had been knocking, but when she opened the door, no one was there. I checked outside. Nothing. Silent street. But when I came back in, she was trembling so hard she could barely stand. She grabbed my arm and said something I will never forget, her voice thin and terrified. "I think he wants us to let him inside." I didn't sleep that night. Every tiny sound made my skin crawl. At one point, I walked past my mom's room and saw her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. She didn't notice me. She just kept whispering something over and over under her breath, too soft to make out. By morning, she was gone. Not missing, just not herself anymore. She walked around like she was in a fog, jumping at shadows, checking locks repeatedly, asking me if I'd been hearing voices, asking me if I was sure the windows were still closed, asking if I remembered things she swore happened, but didn't. I wish I had known then that this was only the beginning. I wish I had known how much worse it would get. I wish I had known what he was planning. But the truth is, the real horror hadn't even started yet. After the night, my mom whispered that someone wanted us to let him inside. Things shifted in a way I still have trouble explaining. The air in our house didn't feel like our air anymore. It felt borrowed, like we were living in a place that didn't belong to us. The first sign something new was happening was small, almost too small to take seriously. One morning, when I walked into the kitchen, every cabinet door was open. Not kicked open, not messy, just opened neatly, evenly, like someone had gone through them one by one without making a sound. My mom said she didn't touch them. I knew I didn't touch them. It wasn't the cabinets themselves that scared me. It was the fact that our dog refused to go anywhere near the kitchen that day. He just sat in the hallway, shaking, staring at the doorway like something was waiting on the other side. He'd never acted like that before. By then, my mom's decline wasn't just noticeable. It was impossible to ignore. She started sleeping in the living room with all the lights on. She stopped cooking, stopped going to work. Sometimes I'd find her standing with her ear pressed against different walls, like she was listening for something she couldn't explain. When I asked her what she heard, she'd just shake her head and whisper, "He's somewhere in here. He moves around." That phrase still freezes my blood. The next major shift happened the night our power went out. It was a normal evening at first. I was doing laundry, and my mom was sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up to her chest. I remember trying to joke that she'd eventually leave a dent in that spot if she kept sitting there. She didn't laugh. When the lights snapped off, it wasn't the usual flicker or hum. It was sharp, like someone flipped a switch outside. The whole house dropped into darkness so thick it felt physical. I used my phone flashlight and went to check the breaker panel. Everything was fine. No storms outside, no outages reported by the neighbors. But when I opened the panel door, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Every switch had been flipped off, neatly, deliberately, one by one. There was no way either of us did that without noticing. I flipped them back on, and the power returned. But my mom didn't respond well. She backed into a corner of the living room, shaking so badly I had to guide her to sit down. She kept repeating that he gets braver in the dark. I didn't know what she meant. I still don't fully understand. But she believed it. The strangest part came 2 days later. I'd been trying to clean the house, mostly to keep myself busy, partly because I kept finding little things moved. Not enough to be dramatic, but enough to notice if you lived there. A picture frame tilted, a spoon on a different counter, the bathroom rug folded instead of flat. I knew logically it could have been my mom. Maybe sleepwalking, maybe forgetting things. But the pattern felt too intentional. Then I found the notebook. It wasn't ours. Neither of us had ever bought it. It was just sitting on my bed, like someone had placed it there gently. The cover was plain black. No label, no branding. The kind of notebook you could buy anywhere. Inside, every single page was blank, except one. The very first page. Written in the same slow, neat handwriting I'd seen on the paper left on my car. It said, "I like the way your family sounds at night." My throat closed up, reading it. I didn't want to show it to my mom, but she found me holding it before I could hide it. The way her face drained of color made me think she recognized the handwriting, but she wouldn't say from where. She just kept staring at that line like it was a sentence handed down by a judge. From that point on, she refused to sleep unless I was awake. She'd sit up beside me, rocking gently, whispering little prayers under her breath. I didn't even know she still remembered any. At first, I tried to stay strong for her, but the sleep deprivation got to me. I'd start nodding off, sitting upright. Sometimes I'd wake up and she would be gone, wandering the house with no memory of it. Once, I woke to find her standing in my doorway, facing into the hall, holding her phone up like she was recording something I couldn't see. I asked her what she was doing. She didn't answer. She just slowly lowered the phone, turned to look at me, and whispered, "He was here, right here. He doesn't hide from me anymore." The final straw of part 2 happened the morning I realized someone had been inside our house without us noticing. Not maybe inside. Not, I think I heard something. Inside. Physically inside. Close enough to touch us. I had been searching for an old photo album. My mom used to keep it in a drawer in the hallway. When I pulled the drawer open, I found something else inside. A single earbud. Not mine. Not my mom's. A cheap, unfamiliar earbud with the rubber tip missing. It didn't make sense at first, but then I noticed something else in the drawer lining. A tiny, circular impression near the back. Like someone had pressed a small device there. Something the size of a button. Something that could record sound. Suddenly my mom's earlier sentence hit me in a different way. "I like the way your family sounds at night." He wasn't talking about hearing us through walls. He wasn't outside listening through windows. He had gotten in. He had hidden something inside our home. He had been listening to us while we slept. And the worst part? There was no sign of forced entry. No broken locks. Nothing missing. Whoever he was, he knew how to enter a home without leaving a trace. Which meant he could do it again. Anytime he wanted. When I told my mom what I found, she didn't scream or panic. She just sank to the floor, like all her bones had vanished. I tried to help her up, but she wouldn't move. She kept repeating one quiet sentence over and over. "He lives here now." I didn't want to believe her. I still tell myself she was wrong. But in the weeks that followed, the things that happened made me wonder if she knew something I didn't. Something we were far too late to stop. I think the moment things went from terrifying to truly life-altering was when my mom started talking to empty corners of the room, like she was speaking to a real person. She wasn't yelling or hallucinating loudly, like people imagine. She'd just tilt her head, almost politely, and murmur responses to things I couldn't hear. Sometimes I'd catch a few words. "No, please. I don't want to. Stop asking me that." And every time I confronted her, she'd snap back into herself and tell me she was just thinking out loud. But her eyes didn't match the excuse. Her eyes looked like they belonged to someone who had been living beside fear for so long that it had become part of her. I tried to convince her to leave the house for a while, go to a friend's place, a hotel, anywhere. But she refused. Not angrily, just firmly, like she didn't believe leaving would matter. One night, when I begged her to come with me, she said something that chilled me to the bone. "He's not following us. We're following him." I didn't understand what she meant until later. Not long after the earbud incident, other things started showing up inside the house. Small things at first. A coin I didn't recognize on my nightstand. A folded receipt in the bathroom drawer from a store in another state. A single glove lying in the hallway. None were ours. None belonged to friends or family. They were the kind of random objects you'd expect to find in someone else's junk drawer. At first, I thought my mom was misplacing things. Or maybe I was sleepwalking. But then I noticed a pattern. The items appeared in places we used daily, almost like they were meant to be found quickly. Like he was leaving proof. Proof that he could come and go whenever he wanted. Proof that the locks on the doors meant nothing to him. I changed them anyway. New deadbolts, new keypad, even put a stick in every window track. And for a few days, nothing happened. But then, on a Thursday morning, I woke up to something that knocked the breath out of me. All of our doors, every single one, were standing wide open. Front door, back door, garage door, even the sliding glass door that had a lock I'd double-checked before bed. Wide open, like we had thrown some kind of midnight party. My mom wasn't even scared at first. She just stood in the doorway, staring at the sky like she hadn't seen it in years. Then her expression changed slowly, like she was realizing something she didn't want to believe. She whispered, "He wants us to know he's not hiding anymore." Around this time, the police got involved, not because we called them, but because a neighbor reported seeing someone in our backyard late at night. According to her, he wasn't trying to break in. He wasn't running or sneaking. He was standing perfectly still behind our shed, facing the house, like he was watching the windows. When the police knocked on our door, my mom completely froze. She didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't blink until I touched her arm. She finally stepped back and let them in. But she looked terrified the whole time. I explained everything, every strange object, every door left open, every noise in the walls. The officers nodded politely, but I could see the look in their eyes. That young people imagination expression. They took notes, walked around our property, and told us they'd increase patrols in the area. But here's the thing. They didn't find footsteps. They didn't find forced entry. They didn't find anything. And after they left, I saw something on the floor in the hallway that hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. A piece of broken tile. Not from our house, not from any room nearby. A chunk of someone else's floor. My mom picked it up with shaking hands and whispered, "He doesn't care who knows anymore." My mental state started falling apart around then. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep without jolting awake because I swore someone was standing over me. I stopped eating regularly. I jumped at every sound, even harmless ones. Then there were the calls. Not to me, to my mom. Every night, between 2 and 3 a.m., her phone would buzz once. Just once. And she'd answer immediately, like she'd been waiting for it. I tried grabbing the phone out of her hand once, but she clutched it to her chest with surprising strength and wouldn't let go until the call ended. Afterward, she'd sit in complete silence, staring at nothing. Sometimes, tears would roll down her cheeks, even though her face didn't change. When I asked her who was calling, she said, "He tells me things I can't tell you." The worst part? There was no number listed in her call log, no caller ID, no record she had even received a call, like it never happened. But the moment that broke me, the moment I realized we were losing this fight, came one night when I was trying to sleep and heard my mom laughing softly. My mom never laughed anymore. Not since all of this started. Her laugh wasn't joyful. It wasn't even normal. It sounded forced, thin, like she was trying to mimic a sound she had forgotten how to make. I walked into the hallway and saw her standing in the guest room doorway, phone in her hand, her shoulders shaking with quiet laughter. I asked what was going on. She turned to me, still laughing, but her eyes were full of tears. She wasn't crying from joy. She was crying from fear. Deep, deep fear. And then she said something I will never forget. "He says you're next." Her voice didn't waver. She didn't sound confused or delusional. She said it like she was repeating someone else's words exactly as they were spoken. I felt something inside me collapse, something solid, something that kept me functioning. From that night forward, I didn't feel like a person anymore. I felt like prey, and he knew it. Because the very next day, something new appeared on my bed. Not a random object, not a note, not something subtle. A photograph, a picture of me, taken while I was sleeping. I think the photograph of me sleeping should have been the moment we packed our bags and ran. But fear doesn't make you logical. It makes you slow, heavy, trapped inside your own mind. I stared at that photo until sunrise, trying to convince myself it was edited, staged, anything other than the obvious truth. but the angle of the shot, the way my blanket was pushed slightly to one side, the reflection in my eyelid showing a faint outline of my doorway. Someone stood inches from my face while I slept. I didn't tell my mom right away. She was barely holding herself together, and showing her that photo felt like handing a drowning person a brick. I hid it in a shoebox under my bed, as if hiding it would make the reality less real. But something else happened that day. Something that made it impossible to pretend any of this was slowing down. Around noon, my mom walked into my room without knocking. Her hair was messy, her clothes inside out, like she'd dressed in the dark. She handed me her phone and said, "Explain this." The screen showed a message thread I had never seen before. A number with no name, a string of messages I didn't send, photos of my room, my bathroom, my handwriting on a scrap of paper I had thrown away days earlier. And then a final message. "He likes when you're unaware." My mom asked if I'd been sneaking around the house, taking those photos myself. Her voice wasn't angry. It was desperate. She wanted so badly to believe this was just me playing some horrible joke. I told her the truth. She didn't believe me. She pressed her hands to her face and sunk down onto my bed, shaking. I could see it happening in her eyes. This wasn't just fear anymore. It was confusion so deep she didn't know where reality stopped. Later that night, she apologized, but she looked smaller, like something in her spirit had folded in half. Things started happening in daylight, which somehow felt worse. Nighttime terror at least made sense. But when the sun was out, there was nowhere to mentally hide. Like the afternoon, my mom swore she saw someone standing behind the shower curtain. I was in the kitchen when I heard her scream. It wasn't a startled scream. It was the kind someone makes when they've already accepted something awful is happening. I ran into the bathroom and found her backed into the corner, clutching her arms so tightly that her fingers were white. She pointed at the shower curtain. It was closed, still, silent. I ripped it open. No one was there, but the tile floor inside the tub was wet. We hadn't used the shower yet that day. My mom refused to use that bathroom again. At this point, I started staying by her side as much as possible. Not because she needed supervision, because I didn't trust myself to be alone in the house anymore. Every room had this heavy feeling, like the air was being pushed in from all directions. But the worst part wasn't the physical fear. It was the way our minds were slipping. I'd find myself forgetting small things. Where I put my keys, if I'd locked the door, what time it was. But then the small things became bigger. I started waking up in places I didn't remember walking to. On the couch, in the hallway. Once, even sitting on the floor in the laundry room, leaning against the dryer with my phone in my hand, screen lit up with the camera app open. That time scared me the most. Not because I didn't remember walking there, but because someone had typed a message in the camera app's text field. "Don't move yet." I dropped my phone so fast it cracked on the tile. When I showed my mom, she didn't even react. She just nodded, like she expected it, like she had been waiting for it to happen. Around this time, my mom's mental state dipped so sharply that even I couldn't deny she needed help. She wasn't eating. She wasn't sleeping unless she passed out from exhaustion. She kept insisting she heard someone climbing in the walls, someone whispering instructions to her at night. She started unplugging every outlet in the house, covering vents with towels, closing all our curtains and taping them shut, not because she thought he was outside, but because she thought he was already inside. She told me he spoke to her through the air, that he breathed different than normal people, and she could hear it in the quiet moments. I didn't know whether to believe her, until a week later. I woke up one morning and heard breathing in my room. Not loud breathing, not gasping or panting, just slow, steady breaths that didn't match mine. I sat perfectly still, eyes half open, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Under the bed? In the closet? Behind me? No. It was coming from right beside me. But when I turned on my lamp, nothing was there. The breathing stopped instantly, like it had never existed. I didn't tell my mom. She was already crumbling. I didn't want to push her over the edge. Turns out, I didn't have to. She hit that point on her own. The night before she was admitted to the hospital, I woke up to a sound I will never forget for as long as I live. My mom's voice. But it wasn't her speaking. It was her pleading. She was in the living room, crying so hard she couldn't breathe properly. I ran out and found her on the floor, clutching her hair, rocking back and forth. She kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm trying, please don't make me." I tried to grab her hands, but she jerked away like I had burned her. She pointed behind me and screamed at the top of her lungs. I spun around. No one was there. But she saw someone. I know she did. The terror on her face wasn't imagined. It was recognition. It took hours to calm her down. Hours of convincing her she was safe when I didn't believe it myself. By sunrise, she was barely responsive, staring blankly at the wall with tear-soaked cheeks. That morning, I called for help. She didn't fight it, didn't argue, didn't even speak. She just let the paramedics guide her out the front door like she was already gone inside her head. The house felt impossibly empty when they drove away with her, but not in a peaceful way, not in a quiet way. The emptiness felt watched, and that's when I realized something that still haunts me. The moment my mom left, she wasn't the one he wanted anymore. He wanted me. Because that same afternoon, right after I got home, there was a note on my pillow. Short, simple, handwritten in that slow, perfect handwriting. Now it's just us. After they took my mom, the house didn't feel like my home anymore. I don't even know if it ever was. I think I just told myself that because I needed somewhere to sleep. Somewhere to pretend I was safe. But now, it felt like a trap. I kept thinking, maybe she was the one he was after. Maybe with her gone, he'd stop. Things would go back to normal. But nothing stopped. In fact, everything got worse, because now it was only me. And I think that's what he wanted all along. The first night alone, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I just sat on the floor of my bedroom with the lights on, phone in one hand, and a hammer in the other. Yeah, a hammer. That was the best weapon I had. Around 3 a.m., I started hearing sounds again. Not loud, not stomping or banging, just little things. Soft footsteps on the carpet, a doorknob rattling somewhere in the house, my name whispered too close to my ear, too real to be a dream. I kept checking every room, every lock. Nothing was broken, nothing was open. And yet, every time I circled back to my room, something was different. One time, the lamp was turned slightly to the left. Another time, my closet door was open an inch when I knew I had shut it. Then, the third time, there was a glass of water sitting on my desk. Still cold, still sweating condensation, like someone had just poured it. I hadn't left the room. I hadn't made that glass. I started recording everything, not because I thought it would save me, but because I needed proof. Even if I didn't survive this, I wanted someone to know. So I set up my phone on a bookshelf and let it record overnight while I pretended to sleep. The next morning, I watched the footage. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. Then, around 2:47 a.m., I saw movement. My bedroom door, locked from the inside, opened slowly. And there he was. He didn't crawl. He didn't sneak. He walked in like he lived there, like this was his space, and I was the trespasser. He stood at the edge of my bed for over 5 minutes, just watching, not moving, not touching anything. And then he leaned down so close to my face that I could see his breath fog the lens for a second. I couldn't see his face. His head was tilted just enough to be out of frame, but I saw his hand. He reached out, brushed a piece of hair off my forehead, and whispered something I still haven't deciphered. Even with headphones on, even boosting the audio, it's just a low murmur, like a voice buried beneath a floorboard. I deleted the video, not out of fear, but because I couldn't bear to watch it again. That image burned into my brain. He was so close. I had been asleep while he stood over me, calm as a shadow. After that night, I stopped sleeping altogether. The house changed in ways I can't explain. Not just noises or things moving. The entire atmosphere warped. I'd walk into the kitchen and the temperature would drop instantly. I'd open the fridge and find food I never bought. Once I found a pack of frozen meat that was still bleeding, even though it had never been opened. The worst was the basement. We never used it, just a storage space. But I started hearing sounds coming from down there, dragging sounds, like something heavy was being moved around. Sometimes I'd hear breathing when I stood at the top of the stairs. Not fast, not panicked, just calm, deliberate breathing, like he was waiting. I never went down there. I don't think I would have come back up. About a week after my mom was admitted, I started getting calls. Blocked number, no voicemail, just silence on the other end. The first few times, I hung up immediately. But one night, I let it play out. I put the phone on speaker and set it down, trying to call his bluff. For the first 30 seconds, it was completely quiet. Then, breathing. And then, the sound of someone knocking, not on a door, not on wood, on glass. Right when I heard it through the phone, I also heard it in real life, at my bedroom window. I dropped the phone and froze. I didn't move for 10 minutes. Eventually, I got the courage to check. There was nothing there, but on the window, drawn in a perfect oval in the condensation, was a fingerprint. Not a full hand, not a smear. Just one clean fingerprint, pressed directly over where my face would have been while I was sleeping. The next time I visited my mom in the hospital, I barely recognized her. She had lost weight. Her skin was pale. She didn't respond to my voice right away. When she finally looked at me, she didn't smile. She just stared, then leaned forward, mouth trembling, and whispered, "He's going to take you, too." I asked her who he was. She shook her head like a scared child and started to cry. She said something over and over. I shouldn't have listened. I shouldn't have answered. I asked what she meant, but she just curled into herself and wouldn't speak again for the rest of the visit. On the way out, a nurse pulled me aside and asked if my mom had a history of schizophrenia. I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't sure if it was schizophrenia anymore. Because when I got home, my front door was wide open. I stood in the doorway for a long time, not going in, just staring. Everything inside the house was normal, not ransacked, not broken, just off, like someone had gone through and cleaned things they shouldn't have touched, like someone had lived there while I was gone. And then I saw the message, scratched into the wood of the hallway wall, deep enough to leave marks, carved with something sharp. You let me in. I don't remember packing. I don't remember driving. I just remember standing in a cheap motel room, staring at myself in the mirror, trying to figure out what was happening. That was 6 days ago. Since then, things haven't stopped. Different motel every night. Different town. But he still finds me. I wake up to wet footprints outside the door. Phone calls with no sound. Notes under my pillow. Yesterday, someone slid a piece of paper under the motel door. It said, "You can't leave a house when I'm the one who built it." And that's when it clicked. This was never about a house. This was never about my mom. This wasn't even about stalking. It was about control, about possession, about slowly destroying everything until nothing's left but him. Last night, I got another message, scratched into the headboard of the motel bed. Not carved while I was gone, carved while I was sleeping. It said, "It's time." I don't know what's going to happen tonight. I'm posting this now because I don't think I'll be around to post part 6. There is no part 6. If you find this, and it sounds familiar, if weird things have started happening in your house, if things are moving when they shouldn't, if you're hearing breathing in places you shouldn't, don't answer, don't talk back, don't engage. Because once you let him in, he never leaves.